disordered eating doesn't just mean that you think you're fat. And so if you are struggling with that, don't think that it's all just superficial or it's all surface level. There's something deeper that causes these disorders, and it's different for everybody. Things in this video are embarrassing and not easy to talk about, and I feel like the fact that it's been on my mind for so long and on my conscience to make this video is all the reason I need to know that I need to make this video. I think what started it for me was feeling like I had no control over my life. And I've heard that a lot with other people who've had eating disorders. Like, you may not have control over any other part of your life or your family or your school or your friends or anything like that. But what you feel like you can control is what you eat. I've always had such an unhealthy relationship with food. To this day, I don't have the healthiest relationship with food. I'm fit. I feel like I'm in good shape. I work out. I watch what I eat. But I also reward myself. And food shouldn't be attached to feelings. But so often, it is attached to feelings. It's when you feel good, you want to reward yourself. When you feel bad, you want to indulge. That's how this happens, is you're not dealing with your feelings, and this is the one thing that you can control, which is related to your feelings, if that makes sense. If you don't deal with your traumas, they're going to deal with you. They're going to come out and manifest themselves in ways that are unhealthy. I'm not a doctor. I don't know everything. This is my experience and my story. I went through so much starting around age 15 or 16. Here I am in different clothes several hours later. Actually, a whole day later. I lost the remaining footage for that video, so I'm just gonna start right now where I left off and continue my story. So whenever I was 15 and 16, I went through a lot. I was in a really bad car accident where my neck was broken, and I'm not gonna get into detail about that right now. But after that, I was homeschooled for a while, handicapped. I guess I was handicapped for a little while. So I gained some weight, and I had a friend who was bulimic, and she basically told me what she was doing, and I started doing it out of my own free will. Let me just make that very clear. But yeah, I actually had several friends that were bulimic at the time. But moving on, that was around the time that I was about 16 that I started being bulimic, and it kind of took over my life for a while, like it does. I feel like there's so much time wasted of my life dealing with these eating disorders that I had, or this eating disorder. I became very weak after not very long of doing this to myself, making myself vomit. It's disgusting to say out loud, but people do it. I did it, and yeah, that's the truth. I became so weak. There had been like a week or two straight that I hadn't actually consumed or kept down any food or hardly any water. And I woke up one morning, me and my dad were home alone. I remember walking from the living room into the kitchen and telling my dad that I didn't feel good. The last thing I remember was grabbing a hold of the back of the dining room chair, or the dining table chair, and I had a seizure. I don't remember the seizure. I blacked out. But my dad called the ambulance, and they took me to the hospital, and I was admitted for probably about a week. I never had another seizure. It was, I'm pretty sure, related to the fact that my body was shutting down from not getting any nutrients or any food or any water. So yeah, I was admitted to the hospital. They brought in a nutritionist and a therapist and all these doctors, and, you know, telling me the risks of what I was doing to my body. And then I was released and sent home. And I continued to see a therapist. I think it was once a week. But at the time, I was a minor. So I knew that anything that I told my therapist, she would be able to tell my parents, or that she would like legally have to tell my parents. That made me just want to tell her what she wanted to hear. So, according to her, I was getting better, but really, that was just the beginning. All I'm saying is that mine got worse starting then because it became such a focal point about them worrying about what I was eating, or if I was keeping it down, or if I was still losing weight, or if I had gained any weight, or it just became even more of a focus than it was before to me, because it was then a focus to everyone else. And then it was like I had to hide it. They didn't really know about it before, so I didn't really have to hide it. But then once they knew that I had been making myself throw up, and obviously I had a seizure and it was hurting me at that point, they became kind of like watchdogs to see if I was going to make myself throw up after I ate, or if I was eating. So I started having to hide it, which made it way worse. The only advice that I would be able to give someone is let your child talk to you about it. It's naive to think that after doing this to your body, that one incident, one scare, a seizure in my case, would just abruptly make you better and stop. Like, that's not how it works. So if I had been able to be open about, I don't know why I'm still doing this. I don't know why I can't stop. I know I had a seizure. I know it's hurting me and it's really affecting my health. But I couldn't talk about that to anyone. So I just hid it. And it was a lot easier then to start just starving myself. So that's when the anorexia happened. I became so thin. I was down to like 91, 92 pounds for the rest of my high school. I think I got up to about 100 when I graduated. The anorexia continued for the rest of me being in high school. Obviously, the high school years were the worst for my eating disorder because I just felt like it took over. It started, with me wanting to control a part of my life that I felt like I had no other control in any other area of my life. And then my eating disorder took over to where I kind of couldn't even fight it anymore. It was just always the voice in my head. And that's something that I learned later on is, about the voice in your head. You have an eating disorder voice. Once you, if you have disordered eating, you don't know what I'm talking about. And it's kind of like the devil on your shoulder. And once you recognize that, it's a lot easier to fight it. But the voice in your head is something I'm going to talk about again in just a few more minutes. So after high school, I went away to college. I was about 2.5 hours away from home. So I had freedom. And for the first time in all those years, my eating disorder kind of subsided for a while. I guess I was busy. I kept my mind off of it, with school and friends and things like that, and going out and being in the bigger city. I was from a small town, so I just didn't think about it as much, and somehow I just kind of forgot about it, as crazy as that sounds. For a couple years, probably 3 years, 2 to 3 years. Then whenever I was a senior in college, some things happened that I don't want to talk about right now. But I dropped out of school my senior year and I moved back home. And pretty quickly after that, I started being like, what did I just do? I just dropped out of school and I moved back home. Why would I do that? Like, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do now? Like, what's next? And I became so stressed and worried and anxious that my eating disorder started again. And it was then about skipping meals and conserving or depriving myself. I felt good whenever I wouldn't eat, which is so crazy. But in my brain, it just felt like I was doing something good whenever I would skip a meal. And I knew I'm a decently intelligent person, I knew that I was wrong, but I also had that voice telling me that this is how you feel better. So for the next few years, anytime I would get stressed, it was very off and on. It would be for a few months at a time that I would either, starve myself or make myself vomit. It never got as bad as it did back in high school, but it's hard to say exactly when it stopped completely, because up until having my son, I felt like I was still dealing with it occasionally. But while I was pregnant, there was no margaritas on the weekend. There was no smoking marijuana. There was no anything like that. So I was very clear-headed, and I realized that I still had an issue, but I didn't know what that issue was. So that's when I started, seeing a counselor on my own and realizing that what I really have is anxiety. And by anxiety, I mean crippling anxiety that you have to have a coping mechanism for that I never had. And my eating disorder became my coping mechanism. Also had bouts of depression over my entire life, and I never dealt with that. I never knew how to deal with that. I didn't even know that I was depressed until I decided that I was about to be a mom, and whatever my issue was, I wanted to fix it or get a handle on it before my son came. So that's when I started really knowing, kind of pinpointing what my personal issue was. Because like I said, if you have underlying issues that you don't deal with, they can rear their head in a way that is just debilitating, whether it be, OCD or an eating disorder or whatever, bipolar, like any of these disorders. There's nothing wrong with you. You just have something that you need to deal with. And your brain is an organ. And I don't know anyone whose body and all their organs just work perfectly. So to think that all of our brains just are going to work perfectly is crazy. Mental health is not a bad thing. It's something that we all have. Some of us just have better mental health than others. Once I realized that the voice in my head, that's who you are, what you say to yourself and what you think, that is who you are. Disordered eating doesn't just mean that you think you're fat. And so if you are struggling with that, don't think that it's all just superficial or it's all surface level. There's something deeper that causes these disorders, and it's different for everybody. Childhood trauma, it could stem from a bad breakup. It could stem from parents, that just anything. You have to pinpoint your issue. I'm not a doctor, and don't take my word for it. I'm saying what worked for me. Yeah, it's been a very long time since I have made myself vomit or starved myself. And it's gross to talk about that, but that's reality. That's what bulimia is. And bulimia is just like a prettier word for it. I just want the message to be clear that we don't have to be ashamed when we're talking about things like this. I openly talk about my anxiety and my depression, and it makes my family uncomfortable, and it makes some other people uncomfortable, but that's just it. We get uncomfortable when people talk about things that they don't understand, and having a way to deal and a way to cope with our mental ailments are the cure to these kind of disorders. For some people, medication helps. I highly recommend therapy, even to people who think they have perfect mental health. That can't hurt to have someone who is unbiased and educated to listen to your problems and tell you they're listening to your opinion and your side, not your mom's, not your dad's, not, it's you, so they can give you real straight up answers and advice and ask the right questions to get you to think differently. That voice in your head is the voice that you have to work on. That's the most important thing. Even to this day, I have to remind myself, you don't talk to yourself that way. If, I'm having those thoughts or being down on myself, no, you have to remind yourself that you're great. You're wonderful. It's very late, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Make sure you subscribe. Especially if you like hearing about other people's mental health, people who are open talking about mental health, because I'll be making lots of videos about that in the future. Bye.